This conference will now be recorded.
Morning, everyone. Hope you're able to see my screen.
Yes. Yes.
All right. Okay. Yeah. Is it clear now? The screen and my voice.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thanks a lot. Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. So let's get started. So today our demo is about DevOps plus AWS training. Okay. So let's get started. Let me introduce myself. My name is Kiran, and I welcome you all to the demo. And thank you so much for joining this demo on a Sunday morning. A brief about me: 10 years of experience in DevOps and site reliability engineering. I'm passionate about technology and teaching. I'm a certified Kubernetes administrator and with a few other certifications on cloud. Uh, my primary areas of interest when it comes to technology are prominently Kubernetes, cloud automation, and Linux. Okay. Uh, so, I have total 16 years of experience, but the DevOps and SRE concepts have been in market from the last 8 9 years. Before that, it was called platform engineering and all that. All right. So just to set that context there. Okay, so before we actually dive into the course details and all, is some you know um, room keeping, like so make sure you are all on mute unless you have a question. You could ask me anytime. You could ask me a question anytime, but maybe don't interrupt. Let's not interrupt each other. Wait for one person to complete the sentence, or maybe don't ask me in the middle of the sentence, and wait for the end of the session, and or not end of the session, end of that particular statement, and ask me the question. I might not be able to view your questions on the chat window until I take a pause, because I'm going to show you this screen and continue this. Unfortunately, dual window is not dual monitoring sharing is not supported by GoToMeeting very well. That's why I can't see your questions on the chat. So you better, you can stop me while and ask me questions. There is no problem in that. But after your question is completed, just go on mute, and we'll take the questions. If the question can be answered immediately, I will answer immediately. Otherwise, I'll answer at the end of the session. Okay, and so we are going to talk about broad concepts about what this course is all about, and then we are going to talk about what is covered in this course and how are we going to proceed and other details. All right. So before we get started, any initial questions?
No, no.
Okay, thanks. Great. Let's proceed. So what a very high level view of what is this course all about. Okay, we'll dive deep into each of these concepts, but at a very high level view, we'll understand the concepts of IT architecture, cloud architecture, and software development lifecycle. Okay, how does the software development lifecycle work? What are the um, various stages in that, and where does DevOps and various DevOps tools come into picture in this development lifecycle? Okay, of course, our course is not only about DevOps. We are also learning all this on AWS. So we'll understand AWS infrastructure services and OS administration also. So we need to understand how do we manage the operating system. So that's also one of the parts of our course, apart from your infrastructure services on AWS. And we learn and apply DevOps tool sets, and when I say practices, we will discuss them about in our class, but we are going to apply the tool sets in our course. Okay, and finally we will learn all these things, you know one thing at a time, and we have to piece it all together, and we have to see how it works in a real world scenario. So we will have a kind of a pipeline, or a kind of a hmm, um, mini project kind of thing where we have this end-to-end automation in one pipeline. That is our ultimate goal. Okay, but in each stage we are going to discuss each of these topics in depth and understand their application and how you can further learn. Okay, moving on. That's the very high level view. So now we're talking about AWS, we're talking about DevOps. So let's talk about what cloud actually is. Okay, so first let's start with that and then we'll move on to DevOps. So what according to you is cloud? You might have heard about this term cloud computing a lot of times. Here I put a cloud. Cloud doesn't really mean a literal cloud, but so what according to you uh, is cloud computing? Anyone can answer. What is cloud computing according to you?
It's a server. It's a server kind of thing where we can pull the data from different tools.
Okay.
A remote server
Remote server. All right.
hosted on internet.
Sorry, I lost your last sentence.
A remote server. That's
Yeah, collection of remote data centers. Yeah, collection of remote data centers.
Collection of remote data centers. Brilliant. Okay. Okay. So you're all right. So let's see what's the Wikipedia definition of a cloud. Okay, of cloud computing rather. Cloud computing is the on-demand availability of computer system resources, especially data storage and computing power, without direct management by the user. Okay, so there's a lot of information here. We'll dissect that. So as someone has said, cloud is generally nothing but a collection of data centers. Okay, so we talk about cloud as if it's there in air or something, but it's actually a collection of data centers available to many users over the internet. Okay, so before we understand this, let's just take a step back. Okay, so let's say you're accessing YouTube, or let's say you're accessing WhatsApp, or whatever web service, YouTube, WhatsApp, name it, whatever it is. So where do you think that information is coming from? Or let's say your tax website, or google.com, or your land records. When you access something on the browser, where is it coming from?
From the server.
From the server. Okay, so where is this server located? Somewhere, right? We don't know. There is a server
Somewhere on
somewhere.
the data center.
Somewhere in a data center. What is a data center? Data center is nothing but a collection of servers. Okay,
Yes.
so you have servers like these, and there are hundreds of them. Okay, so a data center is nothing but a collection of your servers, your network cables, your routers, switches, hubs. Okay, not the regular. You have hubs, you have and all these things have to be cooled down continuously, because these are running 24/7, right? 365 days. So these have to be always, they should not overheat and cause and die down. They should be continuously cooled, and you should have something known as, what do I mean by redundant power? Generator, right? Power generators, for example, power supply. If it goes down, your entire data center is down, and by the time the power comes back, you have to restart. you know you know what happens, right? So there should be a redundant power connection. There should be a redundant network connection. Okay, redundant network connection, again, you cannot just rely on, let's say, uh, Tata or Airtel or some other service. You need to have a second data center. So what happens, this is where your infrastructure lies. But there is other part of this, where you have developers developing code.
We keep losing your voice.
It's breaking bad.
Yeah. Now we can hear you.
Hi Kiran, we can't hear you.
Hey, I'm sorry, I it went into mute, I don't know why. Yeah, I think it should be. Are you able to hear me now?
Yeah, now it's okay.
Yeah. All right, sorry. I don't know, there is some go to meeting issue, I guess. All right, so understand this, right? You have developers who write their code on individual machines, their laptops. Okay, and they take the code and put it in a central location. Okay, they cannot keep their code on their laptops forever, so this code into a central location, which can be accessed by other people. Then you have this thing called as a build process. Okay, you take the code and make it as an executable file. Okay, so this is called as your build process, build and test. Then you deploy this code into your servers. This is what happens. So the developers are responsible for writing the code, and here we have the operations team which takes care of these operations, like taking this one, I mean traditionally talking. Okay, taking the source code repository, building it, testing it, and putting in the target servers which are accessed by end users. Okay, this is what happens in any application. So traditionally these are maintained by individual companies. For example, if Citibank, when they started their digital services, they bought huge areas of land, constructed some buildings there, put in these servers, the racks, the power connections, the cooling, everything they kept and started running. But jump forward to 2010 or 2012, right, when Flipkart started their business, they did not have one single data center. Maybe they had a single data center, but when their business is expanding, they did not have to expand their data centers. Instead, they used AWS cloud services. Okay, so they simply said, we are not going to invest in any physical infrastructure. We are going to go to AWS, and AWS will give us the physical or the servers which are required to run our application. They will take care of all the servers, the maintenance, the cooling, the power, the network connection, physical safety, right? When you have a big campus, you need to have a physical security, right? Even our houses have physical security, our apartment complexes have physical security, meaning some security guards guarding it, some CCTVs and all these things. So the same is the case with any data center also. So all these things are taken care by the cloud provider, which could be Amazon in case of AWS, it could be Microsoft in case of Azure, it could be Google in case of GCP, Google Cloud Platform, it could be Alibaba in case of Alibaba Cloud, it could be IBM in case of IBM Cloud, right? So now this headache of maintaining your own service is not there, right? So if you look at this one, now let's say you are a developer. Okay, you are an individual developer, uh, and you know how to develop code, you know how to write brilliant Java applications and or React applications, whatever application you have written, fantastic applications. So now you want to make this application available to everyone. First you might be running on your system and showing it to your friends. They say, excellent, why don't you make it available for the public? Okay, in the good old days when cloud was not there, what he should have done, what he needed to do was, you know buy a physical server, one physical server at least. buy a physical server in his home. Let's say he started everything in his home, in his garage. So it has to have power connection, network connection, and all the required stuff. He configures this physical server and runs his software on top of it. Okay, so from his laptop, he downloads, I mean, he uploads the code or whatever format it is, and now this application is exposed to the end users because his laptop cannot run 24/7, cannot access all the load, cannot handle the load. This is handling the load. Okay, so now initially he launched some, let's say, collaboration website like a gaming platform plus streaming platform where you can play games with friends and also watch movies combined, like something like Twitch or something. Okay, and then let's say his traffic is increasing, meaning more and more number of people are coming to visit his website. Now he needs to think about high availability, meaning computer systems like any other systems are always ready to, I mean, can fail anytime due to x number of reasons. It could be software, hardware, networking, power, whatever. So he needs to make sure his load is handled. Even if more number of users are coming, the server should handle. And also, even if one of the servers goes down, the other server should handle the load. So now what he needs to do is he needs to buy an additional server, physical server. And one physical server would, it's like a computer. A server is nothing but a computer, but it's dedicated with special kind of CPU and RAM and all that. It would cost you anywhere between 1.5 lakhs at the minimum to 3 lakhs. Okay, and then if you have two machines, you cannot operate this way because there is only one come. So he has to buy something called as a load balancer now. Okay, there is another, just like your router, we have something called as load balancer. What this load balancer does is it receives traffic from the end users and distributes the load among these two servers. So you can think of a load balancer as a receptionist or a token system in the bank. What does a token system do in the bank? It will let you know, go to counter 7, counter 8, like this. End users are accessing this endpoint, they will be redirected to one of these servers. Okay, so now he has to buy additional server, additional load balancer, configure the software, manage everything, and his room might not be equal. It might not be enough. Sorry, his family members are complaining now. You're taking up all the space, and it is getting hotter because the servers generate a lot of heat. Now he has to buy a cooling solution. Okay, now he buys a cooling solution for these things, some cool masters and all these things, right? And now his load has further increased. Okay, his load has further increased. Now his family members asked him to get out of the home because he's planning to buy two more servers. His family members have asked him to get out. So now he has to rent a flat or you know, an office and put his servers and additional cabling and everything, right? That all costs money. But let's say after some time, after spending, let's say 10, 20 lakhs, his business has gone down. Now people are no more accessing this. Maybe everybody got busy, back to pandemic is over, everybody is back to their life, no one wants to game anymore, or there is a better alternative which is launched by Microsoft or Sony. So this person's business is down. Now what should he do with all this expenditure he has put, right? And forget about this. Let's say nothing has happened like this. This is an ideal situation if you have the money to invest, nothing like it. But let's say you don't even have the money, then what would have happened? You had a brilliant idea, you never know it would fail or pass, or it would be hit or a miss, right? But you would have thought, I should have at least given a try. Let's say this never happened, he never made this application public. But what would be his feeling? I might have become a next Zuckerberg, or at least a what is his name, Flipkart owner, some Bansal, right? So he would think, yeah, I would have become at least a Ola guy or a Flipkart guy, um, with lot of venture capitalists running my behind. Okay, but let's say that did not happen. But if he, because he did not have the investment, he would have to put all these things out of, I mean, this is all his dreams only, it will never materialize. But thanks to cloud, today you don't have to invest anything to launch your application. Okay, you just need to create an account in AWS. Okay, you just need to create your account in AWS, and you can start creating your resources. That's what we call as cloud computing, or computing resources on demand. So you can log into AWS console, start creating virtual machines, okay, and start deploying your application on top of them and make it available to the end users. There is no upfront cost. We call it as no upfront cost, meaning you don't have to spend anything before your application is launched. Okay, you'll get only monthly billing at the end of the month. And another thing, in the previous example, you bought so many systems, but after some time, the traffic has come down. The number of users accessing your website has come down. Now, what will you do with this additional servers you have bought? You have to maintain them. You have to keep them in a particular data center or a room, and you have to start applying, updates time to time and all these things. And also, what if you want to do a promotional weekend? Okay, one weekend you thought, okay, summer started, now I want to promote my website in a very large scale, so I'm going to give free coupons to students or organize a hackathon or some gaming festival where everyone comes and logs into this application and start playing. So you need increased capacity because you're actively promoting your application. So in the old case, when there was no cloud, you have to buy at least 10 more and manage the configuration, deploy your application and all these things. In cloud, just within a few minutes, you can deploy any number of machine, any number of servers or any amount of storage. It could be 1 terabyte, 5 terabyte, 6 terabyte, 1 petabyte, no problem. You don't have to spend money. You don't have to go somewhere and buy those storage. Cloud is giving you on demand, and you can use it for whatever purpose you want to use. And after the let's say you put this thing called as gameathon. After the gameathon is over, you can simply delete, store the data in some location and delete all the servers which are not required anymore, and you will be billed only for the 2 days. Let's say you used 100 servers for 2 days. You will be billed only for the once you delete these machines, there will be no billing. Okay, so that's another feature of cloud, which is called as pay as you go, which we will come to that. Okay, but we are as an end user, this person cannot see any physical infrastructure. He's just launching some virtual machines, meaning remote servers, as someone said, right? He's launching
Hi Kiran, again you are breaking. Unable to
no
hear
where
you.
the again, can you hear
Yeah,
me?
now it is clear. Now it is clear.
Right. So you
Can hear you, Kiran.
why is it getting disconnected all the time?
Okay, now we can hear you.
Yeah, okay, cool. um, right, the point I'm trying to say is you create your physical infrastructure, virtual infrastructure, meaning you cannot see the real infrastructure. It is there somewhere, but you can create the servers you need and deploy your application. Or in fact, you can create as many disks as you want, or even something like S3 storage, which is like your Google Drive. You can create your load balancers, you can create databases. Everything is managed by AWS. Okay, you don't have to worry about managing any of these physical infrastructure. All right, and it's pay as you go. Very, very important thing, it's pay as you go. You will pay only for the amount of time you've used. Okay, if you've used for 5 days, you will only pay for those 5 days. Let's say you started an application, it went very well. So from 2 VMs, you or two virtual machines, you have increased the capacity to 20 VMs. But after 4 months, the load has come down. Not many people are coming, so 20 VMs are not required. You need only 10 VMs. You can delete the 10 VMs, backup whatever is required, and delete the 10 VMs, and you will pay for 20 VMs only for these 10 days or 2 months. Later, you will pay only for these 10 VMs. Okay, so there is no question of over provisioning or under provisioning, meaning creating more infrastructure or less infrastructure. You can create only as much as required. Okay, and also with additional capabilities that cloud offers, like auto scaling, meaning you don't have to manually increase your number of machines if the traffic increases. AWS will do it for you. If the traffic comes down, AWS will automatically decrease the number of instances. All this is automatically taken care of. Okay. But again, when you think of cloud, don't think it is a non-existing thing which is staying in the cloud. Okay. What if I told you there is no cloud? It's just someone else's computer. Okay. So instead of using your physical servers, you're using someone else's data centers. This is true not only for small startups or big startups or whatever startup, or it could be true for a multinational company like, let's say, Citibank or JPMC, Hyundai. All these people are endorsing cloud. They are moving on to cloud because they want to focus on their core business. For example, what is Citibank's core business? What is Citibank's core business? Banking, right? Did
Banking
you
and
lose me again?
financial services.
Yeah, banking and financial services. So why would they want to invest in IT infrastructure? Earlier they had to do it, there was no option. Now there is a third party that is trying to give you the same services, so you would rather focus
Can't hear you again.
still IT services, but you need not focus on the physical. There were questions about earlier there were questions about the security in the cloud or security of the cloud. That is
Unable to hear you.
yeah, this is really painful today. It's going, I mean, it's muting itself. I mean, maybe because I don't know where's the issue. Anyway, let's continue. Okay. Yeah, just let me know whenever you can't hear me, or I'll keep doing mic testing in between. So it could be small startup, it could be a medium-sized company, it could be a multinational corporation. Everyone is using cloud, okay, because they can focus on their core business services instead of focusing on maintaining this infrastructure and all these problems. Okay, so cloud is a collection of data centers, like someone has already said. You have data centers
Hi,
across
Karan.
the globe.
Screen sharing has been disabled.
Come on, this is really bad. What's happening? Sorry, folks. Some technical issue. I can't say what it is. Or maybe I stopped sharing. I don't know. All right. So cloud is a collection of data centers. Uh, so again, thinking about talking about cloud, what can be called as a cloud computing? Okay, what service can be called as a cloud computing? So there are five characteristics. If any service fall
Can't hear you.
about 29 2010, when you had to book a cab, let's say you have to go to airport tomorrow. If you have to book a cab, you have to call some services like Zcab. Obviously. Anyway, so let's say we call them at 9 a.m. and say we call today and say, hey, tomorrow at 9 a.m. I need a cab at my home. I need to be in airport by 10:30. Okay. So the the typical response would be something like, unfortunately we don't have a cab. We can get it something at 6 a.m. or 11 a.m. 11 a.m. is too late for you. 6 a.m. is too early for you. Okay. Uh, then you call another cab provider, like maybe from first you call the Sky Cabs, then you call the Dot Cabs. So this is not exactly on-demand self-service. But talk about situation after 2012 2013, when Ola and Uber have become so prominent. You just open your app and look for a kind of cab. Do you need a mini or sedan or a big cab or an auto? You can choose them. Create a resource. You don't have to send someone an email or call someone on the phone to create your own virtual machines or to create your own load balancer or database or even a storage.
And your voice keeps breaking.
It's
uh,
also breaking.
Voice is breaking now.
Yeah.
Just give me a
Half
second.
of the words are just
I don't know.
Try to disconnect and reconnect.
Yeah, I'll have to do that maybe. Okay, can you hear me now?
for now. Yes, we
Yes.
can.
Okay,
Yeah.
continue for a few minutes. If you still see there is a disturbance, we'll do something about it. Maybe I'll connect to my LAN cable. That's the only thing I need to do. I don't think it's my network connection as well. Not able to figure out what it actually
It's
is
probably
because
your audio drivers or
not
headset.
really, not really, not really. I use the same thing every day. No, no. If you have, I'm not sure if you're listening to this, but it's constantly saying the recording has been enabled. Is it only for me, or do you also hear that recording has started and all that stuff?
No, we don't hear that.
I think it's my network. I don't know why it's frequently getting disconnected. Yeah, the speed is also bad. Okay, just give me 2 minutes. Okay, I'll change my network. Network. Hello.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, let's see. Sorry about that. Let's see if this goes on well. Okay, so these are the 5 characteristics of cloud computing: on-demand, self-service, broad network access. Broad network access means you should be able to access your cloud resources through multiple channels. One of them could be your, you know, website through APIs. By running some commands, you should be able to access your services, or through mobile platform. So that's what we mean by broad network access. And throughout the globe, anywhere you should be able to access your services. For example, today we are sitting in India and managing our services for clients in US, right? Yeah, that's typically what. And multi-tenancy and resource pooling, what does that mean, right? Multi-tenancy means, let's take the example of Ola and Uber again. So let's say you're using a cab from 8 to 9 uh, today, and 9 to 10 it will be used by someone else, or maybe 9 to 9:30 it will be used by someone else. From 9:30 to 10:45 it will be used by someone else, right? So this is what we called as multi-tenancy and resource pooling. You have the same share of resources in a city of, let's say 1 million people. You might have about 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000 cabs. These are used by multiple people in a point in time, right? I mean, at one point in time only one person is using, but later it might be assigned to someone else. So you have a pool of 1,000 cabs which are accessed by, let's say, out of these 1 million people, maybe 100,000 people, 1 lakh people are using cabs in a day, or 50,000 people are using in a cab. So they are accessing the same um, set of cabs, but uh, these are being redistributed across these people. Okay, that's what we call resource pooling. So similarly, in a cloud setup, you have uh, some capacity provided by the cloud provider. The same capacity is being utilized by multiple users. The cloud provider might have one physical server which is like 2 terabyte of RAM and let's say 100 CPUs. Okay, so if you think about it, let's say they have a 2 terabyte of RAM in a physical computer and 100 CPUs, or what we call as virtual CPUs. So how many CPUs does our laptop have generally? Cores. How many cores of CPUs, cores of CPU does our laptop have?
8 or 16 at max.
16 at max. If you have 16, you are like very rich person. You might have something like MacBook and all that, right? 8 is like, okay, 8 is still premium, but okay. But generally we have 4 cores, right? Four, we call it as quad core. Your i3, i5, all these are mostly quad core. Even our phones also have these days quad core or octa core, 8 cores of CPUs. So similarly, for a server, you might have this much specification. So within this physical server, maybe I as a startup, let's say I have a company called as Career IT. So I might be using 4 VMs, each of them with 2 GB RAM and let's say 2 cores of CPU into 4 machines. Okay. Similarly, within the same machine, there might be a big company like let's say TCS. TCS might be using some machines with the capacity of 16 GB and 12 cores of CPU into 20 machines, right? Within the same machine, this might be provisioned. For us, it is our own virtual machine. For TCS, it is their own virtual machines. Okay, they cannot see our data, we cannot see our data, but it is coming from the same pool of resources. Okay, that's totally possible. That is what we called as multi-tenancy and resource pooling. And rapid elasticity and scalability, which we already talked about. Let's say you have to, um, start a big promo campaign like Flipkart Big Billion Sale, right? So they expect thousands of concurrent users. Concurrent users meaning users logging in at the same time. So you need huge capacity as compared to your regular capacity, right? Regularly, maybe you're maintaining, let's say, 200 VMs, each with, let's say, 4 GB of RAM and 2 cores of CPU, right? And maybe another 100 VMs with, for databases or whatever service, 16 GB into, 8 cores of CPU, and another 50 servers with even more better 64 GB RAM and 16 cores of CPU. Like this, you might have different capability. But now when you're talking about big billion sale, you would expect at least 5 times more the traffic than the usual one. So that means from 200, you have to make this 1000 VMs. From 100, it has to be made as 500 VMs. It has to be 250 VMs. Just giving an example, okay? I mean, random numbers, but you have to from 100 to 1000, or from 50 to 500 or 50 to 250. If you have to do this, it has to be rapidly scalable. Okay, it has to be the service has to give that option to scale within a matter of minutes or hours. Otherwise, it cannot be a good service. So that's another quality you need to have in a cloud service: rapid elasticity and scalability. Okay, it has to be scale up. Elasticity means either going up or down, doesn't matter, but it has to happen rapidly. And measured service. What is measured service? So if you look at your postpaid bill, right? If you look at your mobile postpaid bill, it gives you everything in detail. So how many minutes have you spoken to an X number or a Y number, and how many SMS you sent to this number, to that number, how much amount of data have you consumed? All these things will be given in an itemized manner, right? So is the case with the cloud provider. They will give you very measured amount of bill. They'll give you this metered billing, like they say, okay, you have used 50 CPUs of 4 GB RAM and 2 CPUs. So each CPU, each VM of this size will cost you around $1 per hour. You have used for 200 hours in this month. Okay, so 200 into $1 into 50 VMs, that is your cost. So they give you in a very broken down manner with very itemized bill. Okay, so that's the beauty of cloud service. It gives you everything in a very measured service. If all these 5 characteristics are met, then only it can be called as cloud computing. Okay, so today we have, in terms of cloud computers, we have AWS as the leader, we have followed by Azure, followed by Google Cloud Platform. Then we have small players. I mean, they are big in other areas. For example, IBM has a lot of its own products and services, starting from mainframes to WebSphere, WebLogic, this world. And they have their own databases. Oracle also has their own services. But in terms of cloud, they're very small. In terms of cloud presence, they are very small, but we should call, they are also cloud providers. But the major cloud providers are, as you can, as you might have already known, it's Google, it's AWS, which is the pioneer. It is the first service, right? First major cloud service. That's why it has that advantage, followed by Azure, followed by GCP, and then followed by DigitalOcean, IBM Cloud, Oracle Cloud, Alibaba Cloud, and all that stuff. Okay, and again, when you talk about any IT infrastructure, not only cloud infrastructure, it would be made of all these three Indian colors I put in: compute, storage, and network. Meaning, computing means CPU and RAM and all the processing power. Storage means your disks and all the disk storage you do. And networking means the connectivity between different computers, right? That's your networking part. So any IT infrastructure will be is made of these three elements. So is the case with your cloud. Okay, so let's briefly talk about AWS. We've so far spoken about cloud. Now let's talk briefly about AWS, right? So Amazon Web Services, as I told you, this is the pioneer of cloud services, the leader in cloud services. But even before AWS, there were some cloud services like Heroku, which would like, or VPS services, they would call it as a VPS, Virtual Private Server. What that means is there was Rackspace is still there. So Rackspace and all these companies, what they used to do is, if you give them an order, they would buy a server and maintain in their data center, but they will give you access through internet to access that particular server from your home computer. Okay, so it is also a kind of cloud, but the kind of flexibility we spoke about, the kind of features we spoke about just now, those were not available in the previous cloud providers like Rackspace and others. Okay, so AWS began in 2006. Okay, and it is the first major cloud platform that we know today. Okay, um, the first service was simple storage service, which was like a Google Drive. In the same year, Elastic Cloud Compute was launched. Someone had a question? No question? Okay. So in August the same year, that is 2006, they launched the virtual machines on demand, which is known as Elastic Cloud Compute. So as of 2021, this is a slightly older slide. AWS comprises over 200 products and services, including computing, storage, networking, database, analytics, machine learning, mobile development tools, developer tools, and tools for the Internet of Thing. Internet of the Thing, right? That has become a common household thing these days. You talk about Alexa, it's an IoT device. Okay, you talk about these smart bulbs, these are all IoT devices. Okay, so just to give you an idea of how much AWS has grown in the recent time. So in 2017, the revenue was about 17.46 billion per annum, and by end of 2020, it has grown up to 46 billion, almost tripled, right? And after all the, I mean, of all the cloud providers, small, big, everything is combined, AWS has 30% of market share, meaning of all the people using cloud, 30% are with AWS. Okay, and if you talk about very big notable customers of AWS, we can think about NASA and Netflix. Okay, Netflix doesn't maintain any of its data centers. It may have had a data center long back, but today everything is running on cloud. And in Indian context, you can talk about Flipkart as a big example, which is running everything on cloud. Okay, right? Any questions? Microsoft had about 18% when I prepared this slide. It might have slightly changed. The problem with Microsoft reporting is it also reports Office 365 as also cloud. It is also cloud, but that's a challenge here. So it's again a slightly older one, October 2020 report, meaning almost 2 years now, 1.5 year, but still gives you an idea. So you can see AWS is growing 36.5% worldwide. Okay, whereas the growth for Azure is about the growth is about 33% for AWS. For Azure, it's about 17%. It's slightly increasing for Azure because a lot of enterprises are moving towards Azure also equally. Okay, so AWS infrastructure. Remember, I told you AWS means, or any cloud provider means, a collection of data centers. So these are the locations where AWS has its data centers. You can see predominantly it is there in the US and then in the European region. Very little presence in South America and Africa. Okay, and a little presence in Middle East. India, they have a region in Mumbai, and you might have heard about that announcement that they are making a new data center in Telangana, close to Hyderabad. So another data center is coming in India very soon. Okay, and they have good presence in China and APAC region, not much, but yeah, they might have come with some other new regions as well in the. Okay, so it has 25 geographic regions and 80 availability zones. An availability zone is nothing but a data center. One or more availability zones together is known as a region. What do I mean by that? Let's suppose AWS is starting an AWS region in Hyderabad. That means they don't build just one data center. They will build more than two data centers or data center complexes. Complex means more than one data center. So one of them could be in Uppal. Uh, One of the data centers could be in Uppal. Another of them could be somewhere in Medchel. Another of them could be somewhere in some other far off place like Bahadurpura or somewhere else. They keep them isolated in a physical manner, but they are connected with AWS cabling only. The reason they put it in different locations within the same region is to offer high availability. Even if one of the data centers is down because of floods or some power failures or whatever, you still have other data centers to support your workloads within the same region. Okay, so that's what an availability zone is. We'll dive deep into it when we go into AWS classes. Okay, so that's the thing about AWS, and that's about cloud. So any questions before we move on to the DevOps part? No questions? Hopefully I'm audible, clear and all that. No disturbances, right?
It's better now, Kiran.
Okay, thank you. All right. Okay, so moving on to the next topic of DevOps. Okay, so let's see what DevOps is all about. So everyone is talking about DevOps, Agile, DevOps, SRE. So what is this? Okay, so DevOps is a set of software development practices that combine software development and IT operations to shorten the system's development lifecycle while delivering features, fixes, and updates frequently in close alignment with business objectives. Okay, that's a lot of information there. So what does it mean? So it says it's a set of software development practices that combine IT development or software development, which is nothing but the development team, and IT operations team. Traditionally, IT operations teams are those who maintain the servers, who install operating system updates, who installs the software that is required to run your code. Okay, who will who takes the backup of your system, and make sure if any issue comes, they log in and see what is the issue and troubleshoot it. All these things are your IT operations. So DevOps is all about bringing the development team, the team which writes the code, and the operations team which maintains your servers, which deploys this code and runs this one, these two teams together to make sure your applications are deployed faster. If there are any bugs in the sense any kind of issues with the application, they are fixed faster and deployed onto the servers. Okay, and all this with close alignment with business objectives, meaning your business wants to launch a specific service, so you have to launch that specific service in a faster way. Okay, so why did DevOps come into picture? Let's take a let's take a little throwback into the time early 2000s and all that stuff. Okay, so there was this waterfall method where everything was going in a linear manner. You when you talk about an application, you think about all the features you want to launch. I want to launch this feature, that feature, all these features, and then you wait till the final product is ready and then you release it into the market. Okay, then it it is a problematic approach because there might be a lot of issues that have to be troubleshoot once the application is launched. Okay, people were spending a lot of time on debugging rather than developing. Debugging means finding out what is wrong with your code. Okay, so to solve this problem, this agile methodology has come into picture. So what agile methodology prescribes is, the term agile itself means moving faster, right? So what agile itself prescribed is, you have to start development early and release your product early, and don't wait for the full completion of the product. It should be a minimum viable product, meaning it should have some features which are working very well. It should not be like, you know, a half baked product which cannot do what it is supposed to do. It has to do some minimum thing, right? You know, if let's say if you're offering a e-commerce website, it might not have all the fancy features of video reviews and all these things, but at least it should be able to give you the basic, you know, logging into the website, check in, and check out the items from the cart. All these things have to be there, but as you go along, incrementally add new features. Okay, so this month you're going to add a new feature. Take the example of WhatsApp, for example. Okay, so when WhatsApp started in 2010 or 2011, I don't know how many of you were using then, but it had only one feature, and one feature, that was SMS. It was only SMS feature, but only thing is you could do it through internet instead of using your mobile connectivity. You were using internet to send messages to everyone. Then they started adding emojis, then they started adding picture messages, then they started voice messages, then the status part has come into picture, then the voice calling. If you're an old timer like me, you know that, you know, there was no voice calling back then, in 2012 or 2013. Okay, then incrementally they have put the video calling, then they put the group calling. Now you can make payments also through WhatsApp, right? They have the payment option also through WhatsApp. But imagine, instead of launching the product in 2010, if they had waited for almost uh, 6 years or 5 years to get all the features at once and launch this big application, what would have happened? Instead of launching 2011 with the minimum viable features, the minimum viable product that WhatsApp was, if they had waited for all this long, what would have happened? It would have been overtaken by competition, right? So Telegram might have become the WhatsApp of today, or Signal might have become the WhatsApp of today, because by that time Telegram might have launched with minimum features and everyone started using Telegram, so Telegram would have become popular. Of course, Telegram and Signal, these companies have better options and better features, better privacy, but we still go with WhatsApp because it has kind of it was launched earlier and kind of started making improvements. Okay, um, so that's what agile is. So to continuously make these new changes, new features, and also when you launch new features, there are new issues also coming with this. You have to fix these issues. So, and also you have to make sure your applications are always available, they never go down. For example, imagine whenever you open WhatsApp to make a call or to send a message, it says that service not available right now, or some issue, or sometimes it doesn't even give any message. Then what would happen? You would immediately switch to some other service like Telegram, right? So reliability is also another aspect. Not only the features, not only the you know, the richness of the UI and all these things, you need to have reliability. Applications should be reliable. So that's where this DevOps came into picture. So you need to make these changes faster. You need to be faster than your competition. You have to do it with utmost quality. So to take care of all these things, this DevOps has come up. So earlier there was this idea of operations team working as a separate unit, um, development team working as a separate unit. And what would happen is, development team used to create a big application, and operations team did not even know that a new application is being developed. All of a sudden they would come and say, hey, here's my code, deploy on these kind of servers. That's it. Then again this throwback, the operations team says, hey, I don't know what code you gave, it is not working. Then again this back and forth used to happen through emails and all these things. Now the DevOps as a principle, as a practice, it prescribes that both operations team and DevOps team work together, development team and operations team, and even QA team work together from day zero from the first day of your project, sit together, let the operations team know what is the kind of project you're launching. Operations team should let them know what kind of, you know, um, infrastructure you're using, where are you launching, and all these things. So together, when they work, they can identify issues very earlier before they are deployed on production. They can fix them. Not only that, it also gives them the agility. The agility is nothing but the ability to move faster, right? So with this DevOps, this has become very easy to make changes faster and also deploy faster with good quality and also maintain with reliability. Okay, so ideally it is a set of practices, but to implement these practices, to follow these things, so one of the key recommendations is use CI and CD, continuous integration and continuous delivery, meaning whenever the developer makes changes, it has to automatically convert it into a binary file. The build process has to kick in, and this converted binary file, the code is converted into a single unit like a zip file. This zip file has to be installed on the servers, so that is continuous deployment. All this process has to be automated, because you cannot expect a person to, so let's say a developer makes a change, he cannot wait for the operations team guys to come in and take this code and convert it into a binary file and deploy it into the servers. All these steps have to happen in an automated manner. So that's what DevOps tells you. But how do you implement this? You need a kind of an orchestration tool, a tool that can manage all these steps one after the other. So you have various CI/CD tools starting from Jenkins, Azure DevOps, or GitLab, even GitHub Actions, or today in AWS we have Code Commit and Code Deploy. So all of these things are to be also learned by a DevOps engineer. And also, let's say you're building a new application, you need 10 new servers, and these two, out of these 10 servers, let's say 5 servers have to run something like Nginx or Apache, another 5 servers have to run something like PHP or something. So you cannot log into each of these servers manually and keep installing your software. You have to have an automation to do this. And let's say tomorrow another application comes which needs another service comes which needs another 20 machines, and 10 of them need something like Tomcat service to be running, another 10 of them need a MySQL service to run. So again, you shouldn't sit in front of the computers and do it manually. We used to do that back in, when DevOps was not a thing, when we did not have configuration management tools. That was done manually or through some shell scripting. We used to develop some custom shell scripting and deploy that. But now that should not be the case. Now we have to have some automation. There are tools like Ansible, Terraform, which will help you to create the infrastructure within a matter of minutes. Okay, and also to update the software inside them within a matter of minutes using tools like Ansible. And there are new deployment techniques like Docker, which will help you to deploy in a consistent manner. So all these tools are part of your DevOps expertise, not only to understand what are the various practices, but how do you make them automated and make them faster. Okay, for that we have also tools. So if you ask me, DevOps is bringing the dev, QA, and operations team together as a practice. But as a DevOps engineer, you should learn about the practices, the best practices, the processes, and all these things. But also you need to learn the tools that makes this work, that the DevOps culture work. Okay, so if you think of DevOps as a building, you have your infrastructure as your base, uh, which is followed by your source code management, which is nothing but how do you version control your tool and all. Then you have your infrastructure as code. So how do you automatically create infrastructure on the cloud or even your on-premise environment? How do you configure these servers? So as I told you, the developers write the code, and the code should be converted into a binary format, which is done in CI/CD. But for the code to run on the server should have some application already running. For example, if it's a Java application, it would need something like a runtime called as a Java runtime environment or Java development kit. And on top of it, you need to have something like a Tomcat or a WebSphere or a WebLogic, a middleware application to run your code. And then you have deployed your application. Let's say everything is done through automated manner, but then you need to also ensure your application is working continuously. So there should be monitoring and alerting. So every time there is an issue, you cannot sit in front of the system and see if the system is going down. It has to be an automated alerting. So there should be monitoring also that you need to take care of. So and throughout these things, what is the unifying feature is your automation. Okay, your automation is that, I mean, infrastructure as code or software configuration management or CI/CD, which is automatic build and release, or monitoring. Everywhere you go, there is this automation process. Okay, so there is this, when you talk about automation, what it means is reusability. Let's say today, if you're creating 5 virtual machines manually, and again if you have to do it tomorrow, 5 virtual machines, it will take the same amount of time. But when you use automation like infrastructure as code, you would not take that much time. Once you develop the code, maybe it is taking 10 times more the time to do it manually. But first time when you do it, the next time onwards, it will not take that much time. It will save a lot of man hours for you. And the repeatability, right? Today, your project might be only using infrastructure as code, like something like Terraform. But tomorrow, if you share these templates with some other team with with some very few modifications, they can start using it for other services, other applications also. Okay, so whenever a new application is launching, now you don't have to take the pain of developing the code is already there, you can reuse it. So is the case with software configuration management and CI/CD and all these things. Okay, so automation is a key factor in your DevOps expertise or DevOps toolset. Okay, so if we break down into a few blocks of what DevOps is, what is DevOps? It's a culture that aims to create better coordination between development, QA, and operations, with the aim of making your application reliable, making the changes faster, um, fixing the bugs faster, all these things. But what it is not a single technology or a tool. It's not something like, VMware, or it's not something like your Java application development, or it's not a single tool like AWS Cloud. It's a multiple set of tools and practices working together. Okay, and each company has their own version of DevOps. Each company has their own way of deploying applications and running applications, and they might use different, they might follow the same process like this: your infrastructure as code, software configuration management, CI/CD, and monitoring, but they might use different set of tools, different approaches to solve the same problems. So the objective of DevOps is to build and release software quickly and maintain applications with high availability and resilience. And then we have very similar roles to DevOps, site reliability and cloud ops. These are also, cloud ops is, more focused on the cloud operations and how do you manage your infrastructure and access control and all those, and maybe uh, less on the CI/CD and the software configuration management part. But some cloud ops engineers might also do this. And site reliability engineering, this concept is actually coming from Google. Google used to have this, I mean, Google still have this practice of SRE. What they say is DevOps is a culture that everyone in the organization has to follow. Site reliability engineering is the team that ensures that DevOps is followed across your organization. Okay, that is the true sense of DevOps versus SRE. But in real world, what's happening is teams have DevOps teams, DevOps engineers, as well as SREs. So how they divide this workflow is, DevOps teams are responsible for making your application till the time it is deployed into production. And SRE is responsible for the maintenance of application once it is deployed onto your production servers, including monitoring, alerting, incident response, everything. So SRE team has to make sure uh, they take care of the production systems, they are running with high availability, they make sure if there are any frequent issues that are fixed by automation and all that stuff. Okay, so you could see these kind of roles, DevOps and SRE also. Okay, any questions?
Sir, is this session recorded, sir?
I think it is recorded, yes. Okay, so now if you look at the kind of various steps, so I talked about software development lifecycle, right? So any system has something called as system development lifecycle, or what we call as SDLC. So you have the plan stage. First, you plan what you're trying to build. Then you build the application. Then you test it. Then you deploy it. This is primarily the software development lifecycle. So from the DevOps perspective, you might be part of the planning, but you are not the one who is understanding the requirements, the development. I mean, you have to understand the requirements from the infra side. Um, so as if you look at this one as a DevOps engineer, these steps could be further broken down into these areas. First is a build process. You build the infrastructure, then you configure them. You make them ready to be. You make the servers or containers or whatever it is ready to take the code and run the application. And then you have to you have to enable continuous integration and continuous delivery, meaning take the code which is stored by developers in a central code repository like GitHub and convert into a binary file and then deploy it onto your servers. That is your CI/CD process. Okay. Then you have monitoring and alerting. Monitoring is to check if a particular server is working at within the limit specified, meaning the CPU utilization should not go above 80% because that could be dangerous, or the disk space should not be less than 50 GB at any time, because if the disk space is also full, your application will stop working. So that's the monitoring part. Alerting is whenever this situation occurs, whenever the CPU utilization goes above 90%, it has to send an alert. It has to call on your phone and say, or what we call in the DevOps world is send a pager saying that so and so thing is about to fail. Meaning if your CPU utilization is about 90%, that means your CPUs are overworking. So in a few minutes or something, they might go to 100% CPU and finally your application, your server might crash. Okay, so the alerting tells you before the crash happens, log into the server and fix it. And think about all this automation we talked about, right? The automation could be something to do with simple infrastructure building or creating infrastructure on cloud or using configuration management or CI/CD. All of these things are written in the form of code today. And also your developers also write code, and it also has to be managed in a source code repository like GitHub or GitLab or Bitbucket. So for that we have source code management. Okay. And of course, for each of these tools, each of these steps, what are the tools we are going to learn in this course? Okay. There are so many tools to build your infrastructure, IAC tools as we call them, but Terraform is the market leader. So many organizations are using Terraform. It is one of the well matured and well developed IAC tool. So we are going to learn Terraform. And from the configuration management side, again, another very popular tool, Ansible. From from the source code management, we learn about Git and GitHub. And the operating system perspective, we're going to focus on Linux. Monitoring and alerting, AWS CloudWatch. For CI/CD, we will use AWS Code Pipeline. AWS has 3-4 tools, you have AWS Code Deploy, AWS Code Commit, which can be replacement for GitHub. We'll also talk about them and how do you do CI/CD with AWS Code Pipeline. Okay, and also, as I told you, there are new ways of deploying your applications. Uh, VMs are a thing of past now. Almost everyone is using containers. So we learn a bit about we learn about containers with Docker. Okay, so that's our whole journey throughout this process. So we are going to learn I mean, there is no particular order to learn these things, but what we are going to learn is particularly first understand AWS, first understand how applications look in real world from the IT infrastructure perspective. Then we understand what is AWS, what are AWS accounts, how do we access AWS, okay, regions and all these things. And then we learn about operating system. We'll learn about Linux, how to log into a Linux VM, how to manage the file system, how to navigate from one place to another, installing software, various other things we'll cover in Linux operating system. Then we'll come again to our cloud. I mean, all this is done on AWS, of course. I did not mention that, but everything will happen on AWS. So then we'll come back to AWS, learn a little more about what are the computing services. We learn about EC2, auto scaling group, storage, and all these services. And gradually we go to other things like understanding source code management. We'll do a bit of Linux shell scripting, which is automation. Then we talk about Ansible, Terraform, CI/CD monitoring, and all these tools. in our course. Okay, these are not covered in any particular order, but primarily I will cover the IT architecture and all these things and networking concepts in the first week. In the second week, we are going to focus on uh, AWS a bit, and then maybe we'll cover AWS in the first week itself. Then in the second week, we are going to cover Linux and uh, again go back to AWS compute options and all that stuff. Okay, it will be in a logical order in which it will help you understand better. It's not like some ad hoc order. Okay, so if you split my this course into various sections, this is how it's going to look like. So first we understand IT architecture, what is IT architecture, what is a 3-tier architecture, n-tier architecture, microservices and all these things. And then we talk about networking, virtualization. And I say virtualization, we are not going to dive deep into it, just understand what virtualization is, because we are using cloud. There's no question of using virtualization. From the account administration side, we are going to use how do you create an AWS account, how do you manage various accounts within a single organization, billing and what are the services available. Then we are going to learn about identity and access management. How can you give access to someone to your AWS account, and at what level you can give them access. All these things we are going to discuss in IAM. Then the networking part. Okay, don't worry if you don't understand any of these things. We are going to um, go from very basics. Then the compute, then operating system, then we'll cover a bit of shell scripting in 1-2 sessions. Then we'll understand Terraform and AWS CLI, command line interface offered by AWS. And source code management, as I said, we'll understand various Git commands and GitHub. From the software configuration management perspective, we'll use Ansible and all the topics related to it. And from CI/CD, we use code commit, code deploy, and we are going to deploy one Spring Boot application on AWS EC2 instances. From the containerization perspective, we'll talk about Kubernetes, Docker and Kubernetes. But one word of caution about Kubernetes. Kubernetes is a very, very advanced topic. So I'm going to just touch about Kubernetes in maybe one session, very high level overview, but I'll tell you how to create Kubernetes on cloud, how to manage Kubernetes from your system, how do you deploy an application on Kubernetes. We are going to cover this, but it's more of a 101 rather than a deep dive. Okay. Because Kubernetes itself will take at least 30 classes to complete it end to end. Okay, but we are going to talk about a very high level uh, based on which you can further learn after this session. Okay, and coming to monitoring and alerting, we'll talk about what are the various ways in applications are monitored in real world, what are metrics, what are logs, and we do some monitoring with CloudWatch. And again, when it comes to monitoring and alerting, we are not a real company, so I might not be able to set up a real world monitoring infrastructure, but I can tell you what we can do with CloudWatch and what are various other tools also that are available in the market. We'll talk about that. Okay, it's more of theoretical session. So that's about the curriculum. I'll come back to the screen, but before I open it up for questions, I have put some FAQs kind of things for all of you, because based on the questions that people ask. So what do you need to join this course, right? What do you need to have to join this course? You would need definitely a laptop or a desktop. You cannot just simply do it from a mobile, not that advanced. Okay, and it could be any computer, but preferably with a 4 GB and an i3 or a quad core, um, because most of the things you're doing it on the cloud only. So, and what kind of subscriptions you need to have? You need to have AWS free tier subscription. It is free for 1 year with limitations, meaning you have to use it within limitations. You cannot create 10 EC2 instances, meaning 10 virtual machines, and expect not to have any bill. No, that will not happen. There are some limitations, but for our course, that would be more than enough. Okay, there might be a few services which will cost you some 100 rupees or 200 rupees when you practice them, but I think that is very much justified. Okay, just like one Swiggy order, you can spend 500 rupees per month to use some services like load balance and other things. And what other services you need to create for yourself? Again, these are all free: GitHub, Docker Hub, and Freenom, which is a DNS service. You can create your own website name, domain name. And what software you need to have on your laptop? you need to have a tool called as Git. Git, or Git also comes with a command line tool called as Git Bash. Okay, so this is helpful in two ways. You will learn about command line, version controlling, and also it will be easy for you to access Linux machines through Git Bash. Okay, or you can use Putty also, but I would suggest installing Git because you would require it anyways. Then AWS CLI, which is again a command line tool. And for editing code, I would recommend using VS Code. You can use any Notepad++ or any other tool also is fine, but my recommendation is VS Code. From a personal perspective, what do you need to join this course? I would say you need to have that appetite, that hunger for learning, and quality time in everyday class, and actively participate, answer the question, answer the questions, or ask me questions, or whenever I give tasks, do them and come back with questions. Okay. And from a skills perspective, I said no prerequisites for this course, but that might be a very broad statement. What I mean is, you don't need to have any kind of IT administration experience, or some operating system experience, or even uh, coding experience, but you would need to have the basic concepts of how your computer works. What is the computer's file system, be it Windows or Linux or Mac, doesn't matter. Okay, how can you, I mean, if you save a file on a computer, you should be able to retrieve it. If you're creating a file, you should know where you created it, what is the file path, and all these things you have to know. Okay. um, Apart from that, no other specific requirements like learning, knowing this language or that language. We'll cover everything from ground zero. But again, you need to spend additional hours after the class to study into them, because the field of DevOps is both wide and deep. Meaning wide, meaning you have a lot of areas to cover, like I told you, and each of them has a lot of depth also. It's not like you study a PDF document and you are a you're an expert on the topic. You have to. So given that factor, so a lot of these things you have to focus on your self study. You have to focus on your self study and improve upon whatever we are discussing in the course. Okay, and another thing, this course will be there about for 45 to 50 days. That's the idea. I know there's a lot to cover, um, but what we are going to do is, in the first 2 weeks, we'll have only 1 hour or 1 hour 15 minutes classes. Gradually we'll increase the time, maybe for 90 minutes every day. Okay. So again, there is small adjustment here. I would require your cooperation. In the first week, we're going to do it from 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. From then onwards, it would be mostly 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. or 7 a.m. to 8:30 or 6 a.m. to 8 o'clock. I mean, we can tweak that later, little later, but initially it would be only 1 hour classes, and then gradually we'll increase the time, because there's a lot to cover. So a lot of and there would be a lot of practical sessions rather than theoretical sessions. Yes, there would be enough theory also. We need to understand the theoretical concepts also, but mostly I try to do it hands-on only. Okay, we'll do everything hands-on right in front of your eyes, and I'll also give you tasks. Okay, that's the FAQs part. I'll just sum it up in this slide, and then you can ask me questions. So as you can read it, this is designed for both freshers. When I say freshers, you need not be a total fresher, but fresher to IT industry or IT operations. You might be in an IT related job, like a software, let's say a developer or a QA engineer, or a production support guy, production support person, and also to those working in IT in some of these roles I talked about. Okay. Uh, this course aims to equip you with the right amount of theoretical and practical knowledge, which I already mentioned. There is a lot to learn from this course, but again, it's all up to you and your enthusiasm to learn and develop, practice, and come back with questions for your personal growth. Okay, and another thing, uh, everything will be recorded. Every session will be recorded, but I would recommend you joining the classes every day. There is nothing like live classes. Okay, and also join with a laptop. Join from a laptop. Don't do it from an iPad or uh, or a phone, and just lie on your couch. Instead, do it on a laptop, and there might be some questions or some tasks I might ask you to do. It should be easier for you to do it. Okay, so again, I'll put these curriculum slides for a minute, and then I'll open it up for questions.
विंडोज से लाते
Okay, I'm done, and I'm open for questions.
Sir, is there any online class, sorry, offline classes instead of online?
I don't know about that. Right now, all we have is only off online classes. But you can check with Lakshmi Garu. She will call you
Okay,
in. Yeah, she
okay,
might
thank
call
you.
you for confirmation. There used to be. I mean, I used to take offline classes, physical classes before the lockdown, but not anymore.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Hey Kiran, this is only Monday to Friday or weekends also?
Monday to Friday, but there might be one odd day where we might have to have on weekends also when we are running behind the schedule.
Okay.
We will have a
Okay.
few classes on Saturdays, but I would most likely to write. I mean, because even my family doesn't like me doing that, right?
Right. So how long this training sessions are going on? Like 40 days or like something 2 months?
Yeah, like I said, right, right now I am taking two other courses which are almost coming to completion. So after that I would increase the time, like we might spend 1 hour, half an hour before 7, or half an hour after 8. It could be like 6:30 to 8, or 7 to 8:30. Typically it would be 1 hour class uh, every day, but now I'm trying to make it faster. um, so, I mean, that doesn't mean we are going to rush through the things. We're going to go in detail, and I'll give enough pauses and breaks for you to understand topics. Um, that's the idea. So the idea is to complete within 45 to 50 days, 50 sessions
Okay.
overall. Yeah.
Hi, Karan. This is Suresh here.
Yeah, Suresh.
Karan, you have already mentioned, no, like in your curriculum, there is no development skills required. But again, I'm asking you, there is no basics also required to learn before coming to the DevOps.
Yeah. I mean, for this course, no. But when you go to the interview, you have to you have to, because there are very few jobs at the entry level for DevOps, right? Uh, any kind of job you look at, they would ask you at least 2 to 3 years of DevOps engineer. That might change eventually, but right now, so how do you justify your previous experience as a DevOps engineer? For that, you would need a lot of practice and a lot of home labs and all that stuff. But yes, for this course, you need not come with any experience. We're going to start from scratch. So it's like an intense course we are doing within this 1.5 month, which you have to back it up with your own practice, okay, and reading a lot of stuff online, okay. The advantage in today's world is, when it comes to learning, there's a lot of resources, and but all this course will give you that, you know um, it will pave the way for you to understand the various channels you can use and what is the logical order, right? So when I started learning it myself back some 6 7 years ago, all the cloud and all these things, I had to scramble in different places, like go to YouTube and today learn this, tomorrow learn this, and get all this headache. Now I know the structure. Now I know what, you will also eventually understand the structure, what to learn, and which areas to focus, and you can do your own homework. And but when it comes to the interview, you have to present not just this course, but whatever we have discussed in the course, you have to present as if you have done in the real world, okay. So there are a
Yeah,
couple of ways you
but
can do. Mhm.
yeah, but actually, we will have to develop some code, and we need to build the code. So for that, what we are going to use for the in
Yeah,
AWS.
yeah, in AWS we are using, we will use a lot, we'll write some code, but that doesn't mean we are developing it from the scratch. You take it from the documentation and tweak it, okay. It's more of configuration than a development, okay. So for example, Terraform has its own language, okay. They have their very good documentation. You have to just follow the documentation and create your Terraform configuration. Ansible uses a language called as YAML, okay. YAML is another kind of a configuration management language, not a programming language. You just need to follow their documentation and create steps as required for you, okay. And so, for example, Terraform uses HCL, and for Linux shell scripting we use Bash scripting, which you will understand, and this will also help you understand the basic concepts of, you know some programming, like what is if condition, what is for loop, and what are variables and stuff like that. What else we have? For CI/CD we may use again YAML. For Kubernetes, again YAML. Again, in Kubernetes you don't have to worry about that part. Docker has its own kind of language called as Docker file, not exactly a language. Again, a simple, you write code, but it's a simple, four lines of text you copy from Docker documentation, and you can build your own Docker files. Not 4 lines, maybe larger than that. So you're going to learn these kind of things, but again, nothing really. Or for example, AWS CLI, again, these are like your command line tools only, like your Linux shell commands
Oh,
only. So
okay.
it's not like you're learning Python or
Are we covering like a basic what is what YAML Docker files, XML files?
yeah.
Are we covering in
We'll
the
cover.
session?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll talk about what is a YAML file and what is the syntax. How do you write it? Otherwise, you cannot write Ansible playbooks, right?
Right.
If you don't know the
Are we
structure.
going to cover any real-time projects?
Yeah. See, again, it's very difficult to get the real-time projects. I would be very honest. Okay, but we are going to go as close as to the real-time. I mean, some of the things I discuss here are like what daily tickets I assign to my team members. Okay, so like writing Terraform code to build an infrastructure. Okay, so that's right. That's a real-time project. From CI/CD also, we take an application from internet which someone has developed. I'm also working with my friends to get some code, and we'll do a CI/CD which is as good as the real-time situations. We're going to build. Uh, so everything is very close to real-time. I would not say these are real-time projects that you can take them as it is and deploy in production, but these are as good as that. Okay, all these things you learn today, you can implement them in the um, production environments also, real-time also.
Okay. And last question is okay. I am working in Oracle now. Okay, for last 6 years I am working in Oracle and working as admin only DBA side. Okay. So is it a right choice to choose AWS DevOps? Because
Absolutely.
how can I convert my resume to AWS DevOps?
Yeah, see, you are in the very good sweet spot, right? That's what a lot of people are doing these days, who are in the administration jobs or SQL DB admins jobs. So you know a lot about IT infrastructure already, which is a big advantage. You know SQL, so you could say from the last 2 to 3 years you've been working on AWS, you've been working on Ansible and Terraform. You have extensively used Terraform to create ISE on AWS. You can say you also have. I mean, again, there are a lot of areas, right? Like I talked about here in this slide. So to land a job, you need not become an expert in all these areas. No one can become an expert in all these areas. You will eventually, but initially, when you're going with a junior DevOps experience, like 3-4 years or 2 to 3 years, you can pick up 1 or 2 areas which you need to be really good. Like you could be a champion in Terraform and CI/CD, but not much on Ansible. That's fine. I understand that. I mean, if I'm the recruiter, I'll understand that part. Or you could be a very good champion in Docker and CI/CD part, and not much on Terraform and Ansible. That is still fine. But there are some basics which you need to really have strong understanding. For example, cloud. For example, the OS basics and Git and GitHub. That's why we spend a lot of time on the Linux. It's not like I just give you some commands and just want you to understand those things. I kind of emphasize on uh, various commands in Linux and various ways of working in Linux. Okay, so you have to master at least 2 concepts apart from your cloud and operating system. Cloud and operating system these days are like bare minimum. You need to have them. Okay, on top of it, a little bit of knowledge on version control, Git, how to use Git, how to use source code management like GitHub. These are like again bare minimum you require to use. And on top of it, among these tools, like within the CI/CD tools or Terraform or Ansible, if you master one of these tools, you would be very you would be a hot cake in the market. Okay, and trust me, you instead of Ansible, we could use something like Chef, or we could use Puppet, we could use some other tool. Instead of Terraform, we could use Pulumi, you could use CloudFormation. But if even if that organization is not using Terraform, they might be using some other tool, but you say you are a master in Terraform, they understand that you will be able to adopt to some other tool also, and they will still hire you. So these are only some tools. There are a lot of tools. Instead of using AWS Code Deploy, you could use Azure DevOps, or you could use I mean, by the way, I'll also cover a bit of Azure DevOps if time permits. Or they might be using still old school systems like Jenkins. But if you can convince them, what CI/CD is and how to implement with AWS tools, they'll understand that you can also replicate the same thing with Jenkins or GitLab or whatever other things. Okay, so that's the thing I'm trying to convey. So yes, you are in a very good spot to switch your career from an admin to DevOps engineer with some good work. Some hard work is required, definitely. I would say that it's not easy. It's not just like you attended these classes and you think you're a DevOps engineer. No, unfortunately, that's not how it's going to work.
Yeah. My
Again,
question is actually since I'm working in Oracle, I don't know whether Oracle has AWS customers and all, but again asking you the question is, how can I convert my resume since I'm in
see,
working as an
are you
Oracle?
working for Oracle or are you working for a client?
Oracle, not for a client.
I mean, you're working for Oracle product.
Oracle internal,
Right?
PeopleSoft.
Yeah. See. Yeah, exactly. So you're working for PeopleSoft product, right? So you PeopleSoft is a complete SaaS, or they have COTS product also?
Right now it has SaaS also, but we are working for on demand.
On demand, right? So you could say
Right.
you used to deploy PeopleSoft for clients on their own laptops. See, no one knows whether you worked for PeopleSoft product team or customer facing role, right? What would be there on your relieving letter? It would say something like senior software engineer or something like that, right?
Right.
It doesn't specify whether you supported this role or that role, right?
Right.
Or maybe within Oracle you might have a client facing role where they need AWS skills. So why not? Or maybe they need you for OCI, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure only. If you say you already know AWS, that would be an advantage because you understand a lot of concepts like virtual private cloud, the networking, security groups. You already understand these concepts. So they would say, why not hire this person, right?
Okay. So instead of, that is the question. Like instead of Oracle DevOps or AWS DevOps, I think both will be the same if we know AWS.
See, all the
tools will be same.
tools will be same. Yes, exactly. So if you learn Terraform on AWS, with slight changes you can implement on OCI or Azure also. Ansible, all these things are again software configuration management. Doesn't matter if it's on premise or cloud or anywhere, you implement the same thing. So is the case with Docker. So is the case with Git and other tools. Monitoring. All these tools are like cloud native in a way. They can be deployed on anywhere. Same tools can be used. Again,
Hey,
like I
Kiran,
told you. Go on, please.
Sorry to interrupt, Kiran. You can continue. I'll ask.
No, the same thing I was saying, right? There are hundreds of tools. No one expects you to know all the tools. They might be using a different set of tools. They don't expect you to know the exact tool, but if you know how to solve a problem, like when I say solve a problem, do something with a X tool, you should give them the confidence you should be able to do with the Y tool also. I mean, when I say confidence, by answering their questions. Today I might be hiring you for working on Azure or AWS, and the tool set might be different, completely different from what you know. But if you demonstrate you have expertise in these things, I would definitely consider you rather than someone who says he has knowledge about the tools I want, but not able to demonstrate that expertise. That's the simple difference.
Hey, Kiran, sorry to interrupt. Myself, Chandrasekhar. So even for me, the same question. I was into automation engineering. My designation was like lead SQA. Like I was my designation says like it indicates like QA engineer. So how can I project myself in my resume when I completely was learn after this?
Okay, so you were a QA lead. You led the QA projects on AWS. You were instrumental in building CI/CD pipelines along with the DevOps teams. Okay, as a lead, you were also taking care of CI/CD within your organization. Okay.
Yeah.
So you were also responsible for running POCs for containerization. You might not be using containers today, but you can say in my organizations, I led the projects where containerization was required. And I don't think they will give you as a software analyst in the relieving letter. Maybe you might want to check with your organization because there is a role and there is a title, right? Some companies have both of them. Role is what you do every day, like SQA is your role, but on the title it might say like something like lead engineer or something like that. So you can play around with it. But no, that is your role, right? There might be a different title as well. organizational level.
Okay. Yes, Kiran.
Okay, any other questions?
Hi, Kiran. This is Jitendra. So, do we cover Jenkins when you say about AWS code pipeline?
No, we are using AWS specific tools.
Okay.
So
So, it's a kind
Jenkins
of
is outdated.
AWS based DevOps training, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say it's DevOps training which we are learning along with AWS. Okay. I mean, I know people use the words like AWS DevOps and Azure DevOps, but I would say DevOps is DevOps. We are using AWS as a platform. Yeah, we could cover Jenkins also, but that would see lot of people are. I mean, recently my manager also told in one of the recruiting interviews, he's like the final call to recruit people in my unit. He said we are not considering Jenkins anymore. Like Jenkins is like old school. He
Okay.
he he
But
really, he
anyway,
really said that.
we are getting something advanced on that trait, right?
Yes, we are. I told you right. We are going to cover AWS code commit and code deploy.
Yes. Good. And I have one more thing regarding the scheduling. So, it would close before 9 a.m., right? Every day.
Yeah, not after
Training.
9 a.m. Yes. 8:30.
Okay.
8:30 is the max. Maybe 8:35, not more than.
Okay. Providing an opportunities, do you folks have any references?
No, I just
Okay.
focus on trainings. I like you. I also get the link. I log in. I do my trainings. I share my documentation with you. I'm good.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi Kiran, this is I. After training, this content and the course training will help for AWS Solution Architect Associate certification.
Oh yes. It will definitely help because we are covering a lot of topics which are there in that exam like S3, IAM, VPC, EC2 instances, okay, RDS and all these things. But as I told you, AWS has more and more services. So as a solutions architect, you would need to understand a lot of serverless services and other things which we are not covering actively in this course. Of course, we cover Lambda a bit, um, uh, but you will need to spend at least another one month preparing for the exam. See, I haven't done my solutions architect yet in AWS. I'm planning to do it very soon. But even if I have to sit that exam, I'll spend at least 15 days every day, 1 hour, 1.5 hours studying because there are a lot of concepts, a lot of subjects which you have to understand the difference. Maybe there might be 2 or 3 services which look very similar, but the question might say like which one would you use. Okay, in practical sense we can immediately open Google and understand which service is better, but for exam you cannot do that. So yeah, you would need at least 1 month's preparation after this course for a solutions architect exam.
Any basic level certification do we have after this training? Or
Yeah,
as you said,
again we have cloud practitioner. If you, I mean, even without this course, if you prepare for 10 days, you can take that course. Cloud practitioner is very basic and which focuses on what services are used for what. Okay, you can, even without this course, if you prepare for 10 days, you can give it up. I mean, you can do it. But as a DevOps engineer, if you're applying with 3-4 years experience or 2 to 3 years experience, I mean, doesn't matter what your total experience is, but if you say cloud practitioner, that's okay, might not add large value. Without certification also it's fine, but our course is not primarily focused on any certification because you know we're covering a lot of areas.
so does that require our we need to prepare separately for certification, or do we have any training for certification also? Any specific trainings for certification also?
Okay, if you're only focusing on AWS and certification, I think there is another course which is primarily focused on the certification part. You can check with career IT folks.
Okay, thanks, Kiran.
Yeah, they'll call you and you can find it.
Hey Kiran, are you going to talk about Azure at high level point to use in interview perspective?
uh, I wouldn't want to set wrong expectations, but yes, whenever we talk about services, I'll do a comparison like what is the equivalent service in Azure. I talk about it.
Okay.
But do I
Yeah.
open Azure portal and show you how to create that? No.
Okay. Because
Yeah.
at
Because
the time of interview, yeah, people might ask for Azure also, right? Sometimes, yeah.
yeah, that's part of your homework that you need to do.
Okay.
Right? Yeah,
Okay.
I'll tell you what can you do with. I mean, I can say that this service is called as VNet in Azure. You can go and deploy it yourself.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks.
I also teach Azure, but no concurrent, no batches right now.
Okay. So that's again separate batch, right? I mean, if you start
Yeah, that would be a separate
with
batch
Azure.
actually.
Okay.
Yeah. DevOps with Azure is another batch
Yeah.
where we cover almost the same tools but focused on Azure.
Right.
Okay, if you do not have any other questions, I'll let you have a good Sunday. My family is also waiting here, and I mean, definitely, I know you might have a lot of questions, a lot of apprehensions, but join this course. It will be definitely beneficial for you in the short term and mid term also. Uh, I wouldn't say this is going to be a magical course which is going to automatically change your career, but will make a lot of impact, and it opens a lot of gates for your learning. And even if you want to continue something like SQA or administration, it definitely adds a lot of value to your profile. All right. Final call for any questions. Otherwise, we'll wind up going once, twice, thrice.
Yeah.
Bye,
Thanks, Kiran.
everyone. Have a good Sunday. Yeah. Hoping to see you all from tomorrow.
Thank you so much, Kiran. It was a nice.
Thanks, Kiran. Good day.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you, Kiran.
Hello.
Yeah, Suresh, tell me. Hello.
Sir, DevOps is a non-coding job, sir. Coaching.
See, there will be code. Okay, there will be code. Definitely, it's not programming. You have to write some kind of code, like I told you, YAML and some other languages or shell scripting. You have to do coding. It's not like absolutely no code one. It's not programming. Like you don't have to start from scratch, but you can use the documentation and write your configuration code. Yes, code will be there.
Okay, sir.